There you go. We are on.
Okay,
Okay,
we on.
Good evening, everybody. My name is James Timothy, and I'm here with Portsmouth Coffee Talks Evening Edition show, along with co-host Leah Drake Stick and Thomas the Colonel Chapman. Good morning. Good evening, co-host.
Good evening. Good evening.
Yes, good
It's
evening.
been a long time since it's been morning, so I don't know
It
what
has
happened.
been.
Yes.
But we're here with us, our guest host, our resident guest host, Dr. Ernestine Duncan. And we were going to have her on, this month anyway, to talk about gratitude, going into the new year. I guess we'll push that back a little bit because we wanted to let people come into the new year and be grateful for the things that are presented to us, this past year and what we're facing. But we figured we sort of pivot a little bit and talk about the situation with youth and guns and gun violence, particularly with the recent report of a 6-year-old first grader shooting a teacher. And we figured it's worth some conversation on that topic. And Dr. Duncan, thanks, and of course she's from the psychology department of Norfolk State University. You can see Norfolk State in the evening in the background there.
Right, thank you.
Behold. But
The green and gold.
And go.
I knew
Yes.
somebody was going to complete that. But anyway, Dr. Duncan, kids are normally curious, especially at a young age, the 4, 5, 6. And, if they're around a gun and have an opportunity to see a gun, they're going to be curious to pick it up. And we hear about kids, injuring themselves, at alarming numbers every day. But a kid that finds a gun and has some sort of revenge or whatever is going on with them, how do we deal, how do we deal with that? I mean, we can look at the parents, not being responsible gun owners, but even if they're not, a gun laid around, what would be in a child's mind for them to pick up a gun and want to shoot somebody because of they're mad at them or something like that? I mean, you can't even imagine a child having that kind of psyche,
Exactly. I think the
Well,
thing that
Ernestine,
has concerned
Before-
that has concerned most people. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I think Colonel wanted to do it. I'm sorry, Colonel, I didn't introduce you to do it.
just
Yeah.
because this topic, we need to do this disclaimer because we don't want to upset anybody and hurt anybody's feelings out there. So the views stated on this program are the host and our guests, and that is it. And so they keep us out of Facebook jail. So I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings out there, especially in the Second Amendment folks out there. So Ernestine, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Colonel. That's why we have 3 hosts.
Mhm.
You don't miss anything.
I think that one of the things that has us most alarmed about this situation is the fact that this incident is said to have happened with malice. So it exceeds what we know about a child who's curious about a gun. The report suggests that the little boy was angry because of the answer that he got from his teacher. And he found using a gun the appropriate means by which he wanted to settle that conflict. And so that's the problem. When I was growing up, not necessarily, there was so much respect for your teacher, you would never think about doing anything harmful to your teacher. And if you had conflict, it was the kind of thing where you said, meet me after school, meet me at 3 o'clock. And it was a fight. And once the fight was over, it was over. But there are a lot of things today in 2023 that are contributing to poor coping skills, poor emotional regulation, the access to guns, which, as we say, it is the opinion of the guest and the host. But if the guns were not accessible, whether purchased legally or not, then there would be no starting point. So the guns start us first. And then we look at socialization. The media the games that our children have access to, they use a lot of violence. And that violence is often gun violence. And that violence is also glorified.
Mhm.
It's a good thing to have a gun. It makes you more important if you have a gun. And finally, the media also promotes gun use and violence as a way to settle your dispute.
Mhm.
So you've got all of these things going on for society as a whole, which includes our children. And so today we sit at 3 years of children. You think about a 6-year-old. A 6-year-old has spent the majority of his or her life in a COVID world.
Mhm.
And so this child has missed the critical periods in development that have to do with interacting with others, being able to sit still for long periods of time, following directions. And so when all of those things are not practiced and not experienced, we find ourselves with children in the classroom who are ill prepared. And the pandemic has talked a lot about learning deficits
Mhm.
that exist for children in school. But we have to now face that there also are emotional, psychological deficits that these children are dealing with as well.
Dr. Duncan, what was kind of timing for me, I was watching a Netflix movie, and it's a movie, but it was based on the Chinese justice system. And it's episodic show, but this particular episode had a 14-year-old killing someone, and the law there in China, and I don't know if it's for real or it's just for the movie purposes, but a 14-year-old cannot be charged for murder and cannot be jailed for murder. And those 14-year-olds knew that, and that's why they were doing it, which was the premise of the show.
Mhm.
How much would something like that play into these kids' mind? Well, I can't imagine that being a part of it.
No.
They're so young, but as we're talking about first grade, and we're going to have some other grades levels, even up to the 14-year-olds that feel what do you do with a first grader? Except go after the parents, like in the Bible says, the parents are responsible for all the sins of their children up until 12 years old or something like that. What do you
I
do?
think there are a lot of ways that we can look at it. And if we look at it legally, a life has been harmed. In some instances, a life has been taken, and we do want accountability for that. However, if we look at restoring, being hopeful for the 6-year-old, the 10-year-old, the 14-year-old. There's a recent story now about parricide, where a young man killed his parents
Yes.
locally. What do we do legally versus what do we do for this person in terms of their development? Now, you mentioned that there was no punishment. You could not hold the 14-year-old accountable legally. Well, we know that consequences definitely impact our behavior. And in the absence of consequences or negative consequences, people do engage in behaviors that they should be consequenced for. But my concern is that there are so many things that are contributing to the behaviors that we see today. The simple consequence may not address the issue. How many people are in jails and penitentiaries that need mental health assistance? So the society is protected from them, but what is happening for the individual? And perhaps we would be less concerned about that for an adult, but a 6-year-old has a lifetime to live. And so is there anything that can be done to remediate him or her? I think
You know,
that's what we need to start talking about.
as far as the 6-year-old is concerned, I was listening to, I think it was WHR, no, how, I think it was the How Hampton Institute station, and they had a discussion on this. And I think it was the Commonwealth's attorney, if I'm not mistaken, who said, of course, the child would not be competent to stand trial. The child would not understand the sentencing process. However, at the same day, we were meeting with a group of third graders in our DARE program. And amazingly enough, those third graders said they had a nice conversation about it. And we were on consequences of your actions. That's what we were on.
Mhm.
And they were saying things like, well, I don't understand. Why didn't the mother have the gun in a lockbox? Why wasn't there a key? Now, why did the kid have access to the key? You know, because originally they had said that the kid had taken the gun out of the mother's pocketbook. That was the first scenario. Then the second scenario was that she had the gun in a lockbox in which the child had to climb up to get it and to get the key. So one of the kids said, well, why didn't they put the key someplace where the kid didn't know where it was? This was coming from third graders, you know, this is coming from third graders, you know, and I mean, I'm just listening to them try to rationalize and to understand what has taken place here, you
Mhm.
know, and like you said, they've been desensitized.
Mhm.
Many of these kids live in communities where they see people or know people who've been killed on the streets,
Yes.
you know, so we totally desensitized to what happens when someone death doesn't seem to phase them. They can talk about death just like we talk about going to the store and go shopping,
Mhm.
you know, but they talk
Mhm.
about it. Many have experienced it, you know. So what do we do with these babies?
I think first we acknowledge that even though they have experienced it, it is still trauma
Mm-hmm.
and it has impeded their development.
Mm-hmm.
Many of them are very skilled at being able to talk about it. They can tell you the things that they've seen, the things that they've heard, but nonetheless, it has caused the trauma. And when we talk about, for example, post-traumatic stress disorder, it is when a person is in has an experience in which they feel their own death or the death of someone else
Mm-hmm.
is imminent. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And that is not a normal feeling for us. The fear and the anxiety that goes with that can be crippling,
Mm-hmm.
but we learn how to cover it up. And I think that as parents, as teachers, as communities, we do not allow the opportunity for students to be able to, children, to be able to express that. Many times we find that as young as 6 years old, as young as 8-year-olds who are in the third grade, we can identify the feelings that we have, but we
Mhm.
don't have appropriate ways to express it.
Exactly.
And so these children are living with trauma and they can talk about it, but they have no place to put it. They have nowhere to deal with it. They can't express it in a healthy way. And it comes out in ways that are detrimental.
Mm-hmm.
You know what? And I got a different view, and this is coming from me personally, and because I have been around death and dying all my life in my military career, and also, you know, in my uh, nursing career in the military and in the civilian sector, and also in life. And you talk about 6-year-olds and teenagers, and if you can go to inner city, those same teenagers or 6-year-olds can be trained to be the lookout for the drug dealer on the corner. And they understand, you know, and they are sensitized into to make a few bucks, and that's the way life is, you know, because my brother did it, my uncles did it, my cousins are doing it, and I can get me a pair of Jordans out there. And so, but I don't have a parent out there that is telling me what's right and wrong. This incident in our sister city, when they're talking about this 6-year-old, and you can correct me wrong, when the data comes out and everything comes out, I have a sneaky suspension. If I was at Rivers Casino, I would put money down on the table saying this is a Caucasian child.
I heard it wasn't. I heard
I
it wasn't.
would put money. I
Uh-huh.
like to see that because I see there's a different discussion.
Mm-hmm.
And if it was say one of the kids down in an African American child, they'd have been throwing the books at him. And because I already know there's two justice systems out here. And so I'm hoping I'm wrong, but
Yeah.
I just have that maybe I'm tainted.
Yeah.
And
On Hampton Station, they were saying that the child was an African American child.
was or was
They
not.
say
That's-
mixed,
It was. They said it was. I don't know. That's what they were saying on
but
that
it's not
station.
mixed, but we have to wait for that to
We have to wait for it.
That's
Yeah.
what I'm saying. I'm saying we have to wait for the data to come out. Which
Yes.
but if I'm a betting man, the way they're tiptoeing around the justice part, it makes me think that yes, the kid is not.
Well, you know,
I'm thinking they're tiptoeing because of the age of the child, more so than anything else. I'm thinking it's the age of the child, why they're so reluctant to give too much information right now, you know?
You can't give us
Um,
much out there. But yes, the child needs help.
Definitely so.
and Colonel,
Yeah.
was
Get
you
it back out
saying,
to society.
Colonel, was you
Yes.
saying that, you know, I was looking at some videos, you know, when we try to research as much as we can, and it's good that we have an expert on here to really give us the real facts. But as I was looking, I saw some videos, especially as we talk about having conversations about solution-based things that we can do. You know, it's a lot of conversations going on about a lot of
Yes.
different things, and we still see these things happening. So, you know, we want to talk about solution-based remedies for what's going on. But I saw this video, and you're wondering about the studies and everything like that. And I haven't seen all the studies, but I saw this video where they put some kids in a room and had a box with a gun, and
I
kids,
saw it.
they're gonna be
Yes.
curious, and they're gonna open the box and say,
Uh-huh.
and the first thing these kids did was tell somebody these are guns. But I'm
Uh-huh.
looking like, the kids are not that crazy. They in a controlled environment,
Uh-huh.
and they open the gun. I mean, I just couldn't see anything about that study. And then the people who they were, that wasn't really a reality to people that look like you and I,
Mhm.
to be put in a controlled environment like that. And then, of course, the kids, these kids are smart. Of course, they're going, oh, I found a gun. They know a camera is on.
Mhm.
So they're
Mhm.
going to take, I mean, it's supposed to be that they don't know the camera's on, but you see them looking every once. So, if they're the kind of studies and everything we relying on to come up with our information to work towards solutions, just like the Colonel said, there's two justice systems. Seem like sometimes it's two systems as far as relying on studies
Mm-hmm.
about how we should approach these things, because it's not reality for our neighborhoods for that to happen. Because in our neighborhoods, you might be in an environment where the people you around sitting there, playing with guns, and not playing with guns, but using the guns. So, so as far as the study, like I said, I just saw that study. Are the studies going to help us in our communities? If most of them are like that, hopefully there are more studies that are more that look more like us.
So it's
As we
really
try to get to the
interesting,
root of the problem.
because what you're talking about is we investigate things in psychology. We talk about the cultural competence
Mm-hmm.
and the relativity. And I know a lot of times when we look at those videos, one of the most famous ones is the doll study. Right?
Yes. Yes.
And the doll study came out of the whole notion that integration was a positive thing for Black students.
Mhm.
Everybody thought if we could integrate Black children into white schools, there would be better resources for them, there would be better opportunities for them. But it wasn't until 2 Black psychologists said, wait a minute, how do we really know it would be better for them? And that's when they did the doll study. And the findings from that study are still relevant today. And it found that the comparisons for Black students could very much increase low self-esteem, right? Because the children always had better adjectives for the white doll in comparison to the Black doll. So we knew from that, then integration may not be the best thing for sense of self and self-esteem in Black children. So I think this calls for a kind of inquisitive mind that wants to know about the cultural differences that exist with our children. I remember when I was in graduate school, and one of the things that distinguishes psychologists from other mental health professionals is that we do psychological assessment. We're able to do the batteries to assess for education, to assess for personality, and to assess for intelligence. And the intelligence test has a question on it that I found very interesting in my training. And the question was, what is the thing to do if you find someone's wallet or purse in a store? And the answer can be graded 3 points, 2 points. I'm sorry, 2 points, 1 point, or no points at all. And the 3-point answer is that you take it and you report it to the cashier. You take it to the store manager. The 1-point response is you take it to your parent. And the 0-point response was you leave it alone. Interestingly enough, most Black children that I assessed said, leave it there, earning 0 points. That was then factored into an IQ score for them.
Wow.
Now, why did they say leave it alone? Because our mothers and our fathers and our grandmothers and our aunties tell us, if it's not yours,
Don't touch it.
you better not touch it.
That's right. That's right.
And so here is a prime example of the ways in which the data that we collect, the findings, the results, the assumptions that we make about somebody's intelligence are culturally biased.
Mm-hmm.
So it takes psychologists of color, people talk about allies, but I find that it is more consistent and it is more knowledgeable when it comes from psychologists and clinicians that are more akin to the people that they are assessing, because we have ways of understanding our experience and our culture that allows us to make sense of what we see and not penalize students for the answers that they give. So the hope is that the studies will help to inform us, but we have to look at them with a critical eye. Who are they? Who's conducting the research? Who are they conducting it with? And how, if at all, the findings are applicable to the community that I want to apply it to.
And how accessible is the data that might come from someone that might understand it better? Because every time I search, I have to go through all this stuff from Johns Hopkins and all these different places, and I kind of be looking for something from one of our HBCUs. So and I know it's probably out there, but and I think that as we talk about solution-based, solution-based things that we can do to remedy these things, it has to come from, like you said, it has to come from people that understand, that have lived that kind of truth, like you said, what we got from our parents and our grandparents.
And that has to be used in the assessment of our children. we have to use that knowledge then not to discriminate and not to be prejudiced against the behaviors that we see.
Mhm.
In my discipline, I serve as a reviewer on the Journal of Black Psychology. So you'll find these studies and you'll find this research in places like that, but you may not find it in what's called mainstream
Mhm.
scholarly activities. But again, that just comes with being culturally competent and knowing where to find what you're looking for.
Mhm.
So I'm glad you're here to guide us in that direction.
You know what? And it's opened up another can of worms. And you talked about the lived experiences of the researchers, but it also goes back to there is a vast of people of color in the sciences that are
Yes,
doing the studies and are graduating from our upper or higher education in the graduate programs
yes,
that can do this, that do studies that. And so we have to make it go back to those who are recruiting at the universities. And also, and I did that for 9 years, and most of my career in the military is try to get the military to recruit folks that look like me so they could do the studies for folks that look like me, because I know I can have better outcomes. And when we look at outcomes, we have better health if I have better outcomes in those studies. And so I've always talked to our senior leaders and try to get that across to them why we should do that. Now, Secretary Austin, who is Secretary of Defense, has also said that, and the Surgeon General for the Army has tried to do that, because I knew him when he was a brigade commander in recruiting command, and they've tried to do that, but there's a for those under him, under these folks, society does not care, and we have to raise our own in our
right,
graduate programs.
right, right. And then there are those of us, and I put myself in that group, that we remain in places like Norfolk State,
Mhm.
and we try to be visible in spaces where hopefully we can influence students that they think it's possible for them.
Mhm.
You know, these roads are not easy, nor are they short. And
Mhm.
so many times when I tell freshman students, you got 4 years in undergrad, and
Mhm.
then you've got 5 years in grad school, and then you have to do a year internship.
Mhm.
Sometimes their lived experience, their real life, the people who are depending on them, they don't have 9 years to wait until they're stable and able to make money. And so they can't commit. And so you're right, it is a multifaceted problem. We need scholarship money, we need supports in place so that our students can achieve the time that it takes to acquire and to achieve these degrees, whether it be a law degree, whether it be a graduate degree, whether it be a master's degree. They have to be able to, one, afford it. You know, I was flipping channels and I saw there's still this uncertainty for student loans,
Mhm. Mhm.
you know, and so students have taken out money to be able to support their education. And, you know, we send how many billions of dollars out of the country, but we don't know what to do about student loan debt. It's, you know, it's hard to understand.
Well, it's easy to understand. One, you have a president that wants to give student loan relief for up to $20,000, and 30,000 if you were lower income and got basic grants. But you have 19 attorney generals across the nation that happen to be residing in office in red states, meaning Confederate states, that have sued all the way up to the Supreme Court,
Right.
and have come up with this cockamamie thing to saying it's going to hurt their state income tax revenue if I allow this student loan
Forgiveness.
to come. And they don't care who gets it, but they understand that more people of color are going to get it. But that tells you, and as I look at Martin Luther King's Day coming up, they tells you exactly what they think. And what say you, Ernestine?
I can only agree. I can only agree.
Yeah.
And these are the kind of things that, you know, even going back to what I was talking about with the integration issue, many people believe we should have our own.
Mm-hmm.
And then that way we don't, you know, what if we could use the powerhouse HBCUs to educate our students, and we could do it in a way such that they don't leave with so much debt. But that's not the reality of our educational system. And so we find ourselves in situations such as this. It's unfortunate. You know, I would agree with you. It is easy to understand, but I'm not sure what the remedy is, you know, because it's so.
You have to wonder about how invested are we in really getting to the root of all this, because, you know, the funds, and we talk about what the president is not doing and things like that. We have all these different groups out there doing certain things, and Leah is involved in a very good program, and it wouldn't have got funded if it wasn't for Bloomberg. Am I correct, Leah?
I didn't hear the end part.
That study that it wouldn't have gotten funded.
Oh, Bloomberg Harvard study, yes.
For
Yes.
a rich guy, a
Mhm.
millionaire, billionaire.
Who's trying to find solutions,
Yeah,
but finding
but,
creative.
you know, but yeah, and y'all did a good job, but it would have been funded if it was left up to somebody else.
No,
And how serious are we about funding these studies like that, or the groups that are out there on the ground? They, you know, one thing you have to, you know, certify their validity, and then you have to figure out how to fund these groups that are out there really doing things, and people have to come together. That's why people are saying we keep talking about things, and things that keep happening. And a lot of times we know what the root causes are, but how do we get to those parents? How do we get to take those, what we know, that knowledge, and put it into practical action?
Once again, James, we're at the point where those who are talking about it are not the ones who are impacted by it. You got to talk to the people who are impacted by the problem. That's the one thing we learned through the Bloomberg study. You got to bring those people in who it will affect, and then bring them in and let them share with you their truths, their world, you know, let them share with you. I mean,
and to be honest, a lot of them have to a lot of the people that need to come in don't come in.
They want to
that
talk.
are offered the opportunity to come in. They don't.
Exactly.
So there lies a problem as well.
You know, I told a story on one of the shows about the little boy, 13 years old, I saw, who had on a shirt that said, "Shoot me because I'm already dead." So he had no hopes for living.
Right.
So picking up a gun, and you know, and when he told me, he said, Miss Leah, he says, easy for me to shoot somebody who looks like me. He said, because I don't like me. I don't like me. I don't like this person. So it's easy for me to pick up a gun and shoot someone who looks like me. And that's sad that we have gotten to this place when we had such a love for culture, such a love for each other, and we just lost it. We have lost it. It's not there anymore. You know, our kids are killing each other, and it's just over nothing at all. You know, nothing at all.
Dr. Duncan, let me ask you. We've had quite a few guests on here. Young people that have gone through college and accomplished now, or starting their careers in law and fashion and all that. And it seems like every one of those people have gone through school at some point, taken psychology. And I don't know whether it was a requirement or there's something they say, well, I need to do that. And it's probably helped them in their field. How important is that for, people going in different fields that might end up out here trying to have some basic knowledge of the study of human behavior?
So I'll preface this by saying, if we have to do disclaimers, on the last one that you should ask this question, because I believe that psychology is everywhere.
Everyone.
That's
right.
kind of my
That's
motto
right.
in the classroom at Norfolk State. Psychology is everywhere. Psychology defined is the science of human behavior and mental processes.
Mhm.
So there is nothing that is done that does not involve behavior
Mm-hmm.
and mental processes, the science of behavior and mental processes. It could be human behavior, or it could be animal behavior. It could be the thought that goes with that, right? Mental processes that goes with that. And so in most colleges across the country, psychology is a core and a required course in the general education requirements section, because we believe that people should have some knowledge about how people think and what people do. If by chance people apply that, they also can have insight about their own psychology,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
those things about themselves, because we tend to kind of gloss over those things. We tend to deal with everything else, but not self-knowledge or insight.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that one of the problems that exists in our communities today, as Leah was discussing, we used to have this pride and culture. We used to,
Yes.
I think that we've begun as a community, people of color, to engage in the ways of the mainstream.
Mm-hmm.
So we used to be very collective
Yes.
in our interactions with each
Yes.
other.
Mm.
We see some communities that are still that way. You have multi-generations living in the same household.
Mm-hmm.
You have young adults who don't leave their parents' home until they are married. But as a community, we've become more and more individualistic.
Mm-hmm.
We've separated ourselves.
Yes.
We take the approach that I've got to get mine,
Mm-hmm.
because if I don't, you're going to get it. And that used to not be the way that we were as communities. And now that we think that way, we need 2 jobs. We
Mm-hmm.
need both parents working. We need one parent. We need both parents working and maybe another parent with a second job. And while that may get us the material things, where is the time then
Thank you.
for dinners together,
Mm-hmm.
family outings together? I talk about church, but if not church, just some event that you all were attending together as a family. My maiden name is Williams, and I can remember so many conversations about your last name is Williams. You don't do that.
Mm-hmm.
So there were expectations in place
Mm-hmm.
for me as a result of my family, as a result of my village,
Mm-hmm.
and we've lost that.
We've lost it.
We've lost it. And I think that that has been a critical deficit in the way that we rear our children.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It is a deficit in the way that we treat each other.
Mm-hmm.
And we no longer value common goals, nor do we value our respective lives.
Mm.
You know, I think back to the bus boycotts.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
How long and how many people do you think would say, I'm gonna walk to work?
It ain't gonna happen.
But because we now are all in our own heads,
Exactly.
we
Exactly.
cannot be inconvenienced.
Mm-mm.
We don't have a collective approach anymore.
Mm-mm. Mm-mm.
And so it's let me get mine and you get yours the best way you know how.
And,
I think it's
Dr. Duncan, we've gone from that village where your parents say, when you step across that threshold, you not only represent yourself, you represent your family. It's your
yes,
family. We've gone
Yes.
from that to children going to the school ready to fight a teacher, and the mother come to the school and ready to help the kid to fight the teacher.
right.
Or young girls out there fighting each other, and mothers coming to the school, and they are attacking the girls who the daughter was fighting. I just can't, I never thought there would be a day that I would actually see our people behaving in this manner. But you got kids parenting kids
Yes,
who have never been parented.
yes.
And it's becoming a vicious cycle.
It's becoming a vicious cycle. And I am also cognizant that full brain development does not occur until early 20s. And so while I think that there are a lot of young parents out here who have their children at 16, 17, 18 years old, their judgment and their executive functioning, those things are not yet fully developed.
Mhm,
And they're responsible for a whole nother life.
mhm.
And it makes it difficult. It makes it challenging. And often they can't balance what needs to be done. And so we're losing generations.
We are.
One of
Yeah.
the, and Colonel can chime in on this, one of the things as we talk about, we losing the generations and things like that, and we look for solutions, one of the simplest things that I can think of is family. And Colonel will attest to this. One, our family has always been together, and his mother, my mother, and aunts and things. And when they passed away, somebody else picked up the mantle to make sure we had these events together. And each one of these events that we do, it's always young kids from babies up. So they get a chance to witness us,
Yes.
and hopefully, things can happen in any family. But thank God, most of the situations we see on the news happening to other people. We don't see these happen. And I attribute it to our family settings, our families togetherness, and
Mhm.
what we pass on to the younger ones, because the ones that were older than us passed those same values to us. And I think that's one of the simplest solutions in trying, whether we ever get back to that, but still coming together as a family and making sure you're passing down all the good things that you saw or were passed down to you pass
Yes.
down to that next generation. And I
Yes.
think you will have less and less of kids that might even think about taking a gun to school to solve whatever issues they have
Mhm,
at a
mhm.
young
You know
age.
what? And I agree with you, Slim. And so what we've described is the basic breakdown of the home slash
Yes.
family unit. And,
Yes.
and we've made trying to make a connection to the village, but the village, the way it, I hate to say, in the old days, does not exist today, because in that same village, meaning that neighborhood,
Mhm.
that if you messed up, that next door neighbor a couple doors down was going to I guess correct you and tell your parents on the way in, so you was going to get two beatings.
Mhm.
Village don't exist anymore in today's society, because, and you look at most neighborhoods, I'd like to say most people don't even know who's their next door
The
neighbor.
neighbors, they don't even know their neighbors.
Yeah, if I don't see them getting in and getting out of the car, because they get in and they in the house.
Mhm.
So but it is such difference when we talk about the village, when you look at other races, and say for the Koreans or the Hispanics or whatever, they will they will live 8 in a house. I hate to kind of put a metaphor in there, but they will put everything together until they're ready to move on. And everybody collective, they're all collective, versus us, we're like crabs in a pot of boiling water. Who's gonna pull each other down? And we all drown and turn orange and die. That's a crab theory.
Mhm,
Pull
mhm,
each other down.
mhm.
So yeah.
I was just thinking about I had gone to Vegas to a court case. And in that court case, you had a 14-year-old girl. Her mother was 28 years old.
Mm.
Her grandmother was 43 years old. Her great grandmother was 56 years old, and they were all in the court case together. So you got generations of children raising children,
Yes.
children being locked up because they've never been raised. They've never been taught right from wrong. They're taught, you know, if he hits you, you go knock his head off. And if you don't knock his head off, I'm gonna come and get you and get him too.
Right.
You
Mhm.
know, teachers are not safe in the classrooms anymore. These children challenge teachers like you've just never seen before.
Mhm, mhm.
You know, and you don't make enough money as a teacher to
No.
take the brutality that they're bringing into the classrooms now.
Right. Right.
And there has to be, and it just seems as though some administrators are afraid to discipline the child because they don't want the parents coming up to the school.
Right.
You know, something has to happen, Doc.
Dr. Duncan,
But
I
what?
know
But what?
That's where I am, Doc. I'm
Yeah.
trying to figure this thing out. You know, that's why for 27 years I worked with kids in the community, hoping to put a sense of culture in them so they would know who they are and from whence they've come.
Yes.
They don't get it in school. And as the colonel says, the man in Richmond don't want them to get any of it. And if we don't bring, you know, I'm thinking about this psychologist, and you probably Wade Noble. You remember Wade
Yes.
Noble?
Yes.
And Wade Noble says, if you take a salt fish and put a salt fish in salt water, that fish swims with a rhythm. That fish has the most beautiful color. That fish knows how to congregate and socialize with the other saltwater fish. He said, but when you take the salt out of the water, the fish lose everything that he's had. So when you take the culture out of our kids lose because they don't have a sense of who they are.
Right.
They don't know who they are.
Agreed.
They don't know who paved the way for them. You know, they don't know whose shoulders they stand on. I went to Africa. The little kids in Africa could tell me who Jackie Robinson was, who Mahalia Jackson was, who Babe Ruth was. These little kids, they could rattle off like me, like this. I came back home from Africa, went to a high school, and asked a kid, who's Jackie Robinson? Kid didn't have a clue.
Mm.
Didn't have a clue.
Mm.
So we don't do something to get the culture back.
Right.
We're gonna be lost forever.
Right. I'd
Dr.
have to agree with you.
Dr. Duncan, as far as clinicians, and you know, there's certain clinicians that sort of specialize in child psychology.
Yes.
Now, as you think about the people out there, the help might be out there, but how many of people in certain communities know that help is out there for them, or maybe can afford it, or you take a child in the first grade, a lot of times things they do in the first grade, they don't even remember later in life. But to be able to catch a child at that age, and luckily the teacher is alive, but you take a child at that age and they can get help then. Imagine, because you can take grown-ups that have a full life in their head and turn them around, and make them see the light. Imagine being able to take a child like that, even before they do something like that, when you notice something,
Early intervention. Early intervention.
So, I mean, yeah, go ahead. Is it available for certain communities, people in certain communities, or that they know about it? Because I'm sure other people are getting help.
It's more available now than it's ever been.
Okay.
And I don't know what that really means in the whole scheme of things. Mental health has always been available. Some of the confounds, however, is that, we talk about you must be crazy if you have to go get some type of intervention like that. And people stay away from that, the stigma of seeing a clinician, of seeing a therapist.
Or don't want to make their children have a problem.
They don't want their children to have
they're a product of them.
Exactly, that it reflects negatively on the family. And we've all heard those things, whatever goes on in this house, it stays in this house. You don't talk about those kinds of things. I can remember being influenced to be a psychologist because my own family, there were people in my family who had, most likely back then, they had autism
Uh-huh.
and they didn't get help. And what I observed as a child was the child would be in the back room. They could come out for meals, but everybody knew they were different. They didn't get any help, any formal help. It was just the family, that individual who we said they were special.
Uh-huh.
So the
Yeah.
help has been
Everybody
available.
accepted it.
Whether or not we seek it is another question. But that's also influenced by the fact about the cultural competency.
Mhm.
Do we go right now, less than 2% of all psychologists are Black.
Mhm.
Mhm.
And that's reflected in similar demographics across other professions. And so if you want to go to someone who you think thinks can understand your experience, there are limits there as well. Then there is the affordability issue. Mental
Mhm.
health parity. Mental health has the least comprehensive benefits of all benefits.
Mhm.
So, the move now has been that there are many clinicians who no longer accept insurance because it's not worth it to them. And so
Exactly.
what they do is they can only see people who have who pay themselves out of pocket. And that limits then who can be seen. So there are many, many confounds that are impacting what's happening. There are limited resources. There was a wave about 20 years ago to mental health services that were referred to as in-home counseling,
Mhm.
because often families didn't have the resources to take the time and go to a therapist's
Right.
office, go
Right.
to a clinician's office. They didn't have the transportation. So in-home counseling was a thing. And it was effective for a period of time, but then there was abuse of that system. And
Exactly.
you had companies that were established that were going to the home, playing basketball and
Mhm.
billing like they were doing therapy.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
so then there were restrictions put on that. So I say all of that to say, since the pandemic, there's been the acknowledgement that there's a need for mental health services.
Mhm. Mhm.
There are some services that you can get on a limited basis that would be free. Then there are some that are based on the income of the family, a sliding scale. And then there are the traditional services where people do use their insurance, and their insurance then covers a portion, if not all, all of the clinician's visit.
No.
I think also sometimes we vent our frustrations into the wrong direction at the wrong people. You hear a lot of people, citizens say, well, the politicians need to do something. The city manager needs to do something. The preacher needs to do something. Everybody needs to do something. And nobody really wants to get to the real root of the problem, although we talk about it.
Mhm.
Exactly.
You know,
Exactly.
parenting, even though it's not, parenting is not something that can be really taught. It's something, it's an experience that you have, each of us have. But I think we just need to, direct our frustrations where it should be and where it would make the most, it would make the most progress. And we don't seem to do that because we don't want to hurt people's feelings. We
Exactly.
don't want to tell people they're a bad parent or
Exactly.
what they're doing in their home is detrimental to their kids
Mhm.
later on. And then they sit back and wonder why their kid is in jail for 20 years. So a lot of focus, and I know a lot of focus is being put there, but we're just letting so many other things distract us and blaming
Yes.
other people for something that they can't do.
And I think that's where what you spoke about earlier in the kernel, that family, because a
Mhm.
lot of times, although you can't teach people to parent, you can watch what's being done
Exactly.
in your circle.
Right.
And
Mhm.
I am of an era where grandmothers did tell their children what to do around
Exactly.
parenting.
Exactly.
And you honored that because they were successful in doing it, you
Mhm.
know, but we don't have those conversations anymore. And you know, you can look at any of these talk shows to see these dysfunctional
Yes.
families
Yes.
where, you know, as Leah mentioned, the mother is only 14 years older than the child, and they're actually battling each other
Each other.
as though they're equals.
Exactly.
There's jealousy between them.
Uh-huh.
They often are competing for the same things.
Yes.
And those developmental steps of being a parent are absent.
Well, Dr. Duncan, what about the impact of fetal alcohol syndrome, and as
Mhm.
well as parents who are on drugs when they conceive and carry children?
Right. So I think, if I'm correct, crack babies,
Mm-hmm.
right, are about 20, 30 years old now,
Uh-huh.
right? And we've always seen fetal alcohol
Yes.
as having an impact neurologically,
Mm-hmm.
cognitively, and emotionally on
Yeah.
children. So clearly, there are things that, you know, we used to blame moms. We used to say
Uh-huh.
it's just if the mom is ingesting drugs, if the mom is drinking. But we find out now that the father
Father, that's right.
contributes to those issues
Exactly.
as well. And so children are being born kind of handicapped, if you will,
Uh-huh.
because they have these issues that they have developed prenatally.
Mm-hmm.
And if they're not discovered until it's time for the child to go to school, again, we've missed several critical periods where we could remediate them. So those things are having a clear impact. I even consider childcare. A lot of times it is just most effective and efficient for us to take our child to a daycare
Mm.
where they don't get individualized
Exactly.
attention.
That's right.
And so again, critical periods are missed. So there are so many things and so many times, so many places where we could intervene,
Uh-huh.
but we miss them.
Well, do you think the ACEs, do you think that's a good tool to use in order to determine, and are they truly using it now? I know you were hearing a lot about it at one time, but you're not hearing as much about it anymore.
I'm kind of limited in my experience of knowing about the use, but again, I think that it's the cultural competency
Yes,
of of the evaluator to
exactly.
be able to
Exactly.
know when it's indicated to
Mhm.
use a particular instrument, and then how are you going to, one, interpret the results, but I think even more importantly, how are you then going to share those results
Uh-huh.
with the parents and the teachers who could then make a difference?
Exactly. Exactly.
Um, you know, there also was a time in which we didn't want our children to have a diagnosis because it reflected negatively on the family. But then we went through a period of time where if
They'll
children had
fight
a
you now. If you try
disability,
to tell them, if you try to tell them their children don't have a problem, they'll be ready to beat you down now. They want
right,
that check. They want
because
that check every month.
a check is associated with it.
Exactly.
But then do you take the necessary steps to address whatever it is that child is receiving a check for?
Exactly.
I think that when parents are overworked or when they're someplace else, they don't have the oversight over their children to know what they're watching, to know what they're doing when they're home alone. And those are all checks and balances that contribute to healthy development. Sometimes children are not even eating well, and that has an impact on their
It
development.
does. It does.
Well, you know what? The other piece to that, there's another flip side of seeking behavioral health help or psychological help is depending on the job that you're applying for or in, it can affect your promotions or security clearances and that kind of stuff, and or negative. So we keep things bottled up and won't say anything or either
Yeah.
hide it. So I don't want to get this on my record because I won't get a civil service job, or I cannot go into the military if I'm taking ADHD meds. I have to be off it for 6 months and have this documented, and I can't join the military, or I can't get a commission. If I'm on it, I can't even go through RTC with that. And so
That's
I
right.
am basically, it has cut me off of whatever I wanted to do in the future. So why, why seek help, even though I know I need help?
And the unfortunate thing, as you mentioned earlier, Colonel, there are two sets of rules, right? Because people who are affluent
Mhm.
just simply pay for it out of pocket.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
And then therefore the record is not
There.
as apparent
Yeah.
as when they've used their medical benefits and resources. And so again, we're confronted with a difficult situation and how to deal with the disparities.
Yes,
Mhm.
yes. And you're correct in paying out of pocket. And I've known folks to pay out of pocket to get care, and you just keep it out. And then when it's come time to disclose, you just have what they call as a memory lapse.
Mhm.
Mhm.
I don't understand. It's like the lawyer for Trump told that the young girl says, just don't remember stuff, and they can't do anything. So yes.
James?
Yeah, and we kind of see the results, if you don't, early intervention doesn't come. We look at this guy that killed the 4 college students.
Yes,
And you
yes.
knew something happened. He just didn't become grown and snap.
Mhm.
Something was going on with that guy
Mhm.
for years.
Mhm.
And I don't know this for sure, but I'm just, we give our opinions. Probably something started in childhood. I guess when it all comes out, because they're going to study him, because
Mhm.
that's what psychologists do. They study that human behavior so they can know going forward. But I'm sure something like that happened. Something happened to him in childhood,
Yeah.
you know, to
I
take
think
4
we will
lives
find
like that.
I think that we will find out. I think that childhood is a critical period of our development. Adolescence, much of the early years of our lives. But it's a real tightrope because
Mhm.
you don't want to think that everything that someone does that's atypical means that down the road they're going to have problems.
Uh-huh.
So we have to be careful about prematurely diagnosing or stigmatizing people, but it does take a close eye and monitoring. And
Yes.
as I said, the kind of conversations with family, parents, and children, those who are in authority, to be able to ask the questions that get the answers
Mhm.
that give us
Mhm.
what we need.
Yeah,
That's
when you
true.
feel comfortable to talk to your family members about anything, it makes a world of difference down the road.
It does. It
Doesn't
does.
solve all problems, but it surely makes and makes you makes it easier for you to deal with other people if you have to deal with a psychologist or clinician, and being able to openly express yourself if you've had that experience with family. I think.
Psychologically speaking, when we look at social development, um, Kohlberg is one of the names that we refer to often. And he says that there are different stages that we go through psychosocially that tell us about the world. And as early as infancy, he says we learn that the world is a safe place or it's not a safe place based on how people respond to us. So that if I'm an infant and I'm hungry, or if I'm an infant and I cry and I'm wet, and I cry because of that discomfort,
Uh-huh.
and someone attends to me, I learn that the world is a safe place because
Exactly.
once I make my needs known,
Mm-hmm.
I'm responded to. But for those children who don't get responded to, they cry and nothing happens. They're signaling to the world, I need something. Those children learn that the world is not a safe place.
Mhm.
And they carry that with them until they learn otherwise, if they learn otherwise. But can you imagine then the difference in how I approach the world if I feel like it's a safe place versus if I feel like I have no agency? And I think
Exactly.
families provide us with that agency. If I can
Exactly.
talk to my family and I'm still accepted, I still have unconditional love. They may not like what I do,
Exactly.
they may not agree with me,
Mm-hmm.
but the world is still a safe place.
Mm-hmm.
Versus those who grow up with another idea and don't feel safe, they're always on the defense.
Exactly.
In the meantime, what happens to this 6-year-old first grader? Is he in, I know he's not in custody per se, like a grown person would. Is he back with family? And as we
Probably
talked
not.
about not being able to afford psychotherapy, would that be something that would be ordered by the court that, he would automatically get? What happens? What do you do with a 6-year-old that creates that kind of crime?
Legally, I do not know. I do know, however, that he will be evaluated, and that question of whether or not he is aware of the consequences of his behavior. That's one of the criteria that is necessary to hold him accountable for his actions. And that's done with psychological assessment. So there will be, I do know there will be psychological assessment for this child. And the first questions will be addressed legally.
Mm-hmm.
Was he aware that shooting someone could result in death? Does he understand the consequences of his actions? Because many times people are not held legally responsible for things because they didn't understand the impact of what they did. So that will be part of the first assessment. And then again, we're dealing with questions about whether or not this child had some mental issues versus whether or not this child is mentally ill.
Exactly.
The research looks at kids between 4 and 19, what I looked at, and talked about some of the consequences of COVID kids.
Mm-hmm.
There's increased anxiety, there's increased depression, there's increased tension, anger, frustration, and stress. But that's not mental illness. This child could have a psychological illness. We don't know.
Exactly.
This child could have a thought disorder. We don't know. So there will be assessments, psychological assessments to determine his ability to be competent to stand trial. And then there will be psychological assessments to evaluate his mental status.
It's amazing. I don't mean to make fun or jest it, but the only time I can remember really having really problems when Tommy and I were little and we'd be at church and the girl liked him more than she liked me. And that's the only time I really, I didn't take it out on him. He was a little cute guy. So, but
I know.
I say that just to
Yeah,
light the conversation. But yeah, I'm really I don't remember having that kind of anxiety in me that young. I just didn't know enough. Maybe the environment I had, and we can go back to family, the kind of family that was around at the time, sort of kept me from going outside of that, from letting something like that really affect me to the point where I want to do something crazy.
But but I know while working at the Pines Treatment Center, we often had 5, 6, 7, 8-year-olds in the treatment facility. So I can't see them taking the child home until they assess this whole idea about how the child got the gun. So more than likely, they may take him and put him in a foster care system, or they may put him in a treatment system. But they have to assess, how did this kid really get a hold of this gun? Why were the bullets in the gun? Why was the key where the kid could get the gun, get the key, if the key was in a lockbox. Did the kid truly climb up on something to open this lockbox in order to get it? I mean, there's so many things they're going to have to look at and make an assessment as to what they're going to do with this child.
I always wanted to ask this of a gun owner, and we have Tommy up here. And I want to ask you, people talk about the gun locks and everything like that. And if they have them in the home and they have it, the lock on the trigger or whatever, however they have it locked up, that would put them at a disadvantage if they were home invaded. They would have to find the gun. Well, they knew where the gun is, know where the gun is. And they would have to get the gun, unlock it, and by that time, they would be violated or whatever. So is it that difficulty? I mean, as far as making sure that gun is secured from a child being able to have access to it?
No, it's not good. If you got a gun lock, it doesn't take that long to put 2 and 2 together to get it out. It's all in one motion.
Because I've heard that argument. That's why.
Yeah.
For people that don't want to have their guns locked up in the house.
And plus, and they're suggesting that if you do have a lockbox, that you have one that has either finger recognition or facial recognition, no key, or a combination lock in order to get into it, as opposed to just having a key that someone can get the key and open the box and get the gun out. Because I mean, there were some statistics they put out here. They said every day, 78 children, teens, and young adults are injured or killed by guns in the U.S. 1 in 3 homes with children in the U.S. have a gun. Children as young as 3 years of age may be strong enough to pull the trigger on a handgun. 3 out of 4 children, including those less than 10 years old, living in a house with a gun, know where the gun is, even when the parents think they don't. If you own a gun, lock it up and unload it. Keep ammunition locked up separately.
Yeah.
And if your children are going to visit other people's homes, ask those people if they have a gun in the home. You need to know where your children are going when they go and visit their friends, because they may have a gun there in the home, may not be locked up. And kids are curious. If they see a gun, they're going to pick it up. I don't know many who would not, and especially with the use, especially with the use of these video games and the shows that they're watching on TV, they are more curious than ever about guns, and the thought that this kid, it just hurts my heart, had this gun in his backpack all day or wherever he had it, wherever he hid it. And at the close of the day, close to the close of the day, that gun was there all day long. At the close of the day.
Anybody could have made him mad.
Anybody.
In the course of the day.
Anybody.
And was that the only day?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then they say he'd had an altercation with the teacher. We don't know what that was all about. But this is what has been said. I don't know if it's true or not, that the person who tried to subdue him, he fought that person off as well. So you don't know what was going on with this child.
Right.
Right. You don't know what was taking place with them.
Right.
Now all these kids in this classroom has been traumatized.
Right.
All of those kids need some type of treatment.
Exactly.
They all need treatment.
They don't even know what day they open the school back up yet. They haven't
Yeah.
determined that. Of course, Monday is a holiday, so they have that grace period. So
I do think it's important, though, before I stop, to acknowledge that regardless to whatever we find out as it relates to how the gun was accessed, what kind of question triggered this child, there's something about him that still is 6 years old.
Exactly.
And
Oof.
I can recall being 6 and being in trouble for things so much less serious than this. So I do think that if he, one of the options is going to be treatment.
Yes.
We have to be concerned about his self-harm.
Exactly.
Because, we can talk about the brain is not fully developed until 26, 23, 24, 25, 26. It's really still developing at 6.
Yeah.
and his behavior. This may really just be the result of him being impulsive,
Uh-huh.
being angry, but being
Exactly.
impulsive. And
Mhm.
now look what has happened.
Yes.
And so I do think it's important for us to also remember that he's a child.
He's a child.
He's a child.
He's a child.
You know, having that gun in the backpack wouldn't make it premeditation, would it? That's another
For
legal.
me, these questions are more legal,
Yeah,
and I
legal.
Yeah.
don't know.
Yeah.
Anything.
Oof.
Well, anyway, we're winding down, and Dr. Duncan, thanks for coming on and sharing your knowledge, your expertise, really, on this subject matter. And maybe next month we'll talk about gratitude.
About being grateful. Okay,
Being
I look
grateful.
forward to it. And I thank you again for the opportunity. I think these conversations are needed, and I think that once people see them, it sparks them to talk about this someplace else in another forum. And that's the only way we're going to start to address these issues.
Mhm.
And something everybody can do is take it to your family.
Uh-huh.
Yes.
Appreciate your family and make sure that family dynamic is tight, and you're raising people in your family
Exactly.
to respect.
Yes.
Yes.
And get that culture back into our children, please. Get
Yeah.
it back. Let's get it back.
Yes,
We have to.
we do.
We really
Any-
do.
Any other last comments from the host before we close out here?
Well, Dr. Duncan, once again,
Thank you.
all I can say is thank you.
Thank you.
Because it is a topic that we really need to talk about,
Mhm.
and we need to keep it constantly in the forefront, so that we will not have more of these incidents taking place in our schools and in our communities. Each of us have a job to do.
Yes.
If there was a saying back in the day, each one teach one. So if everybody just took one child under their wings, you can make a difference in that child's life, So it's incumbent upon us to be there for the children, to help them to see who they are and to know who they are.
Yes.
And that is crucial at this stage of the game. They don't have a sense of history at all,
Yes.
none at all. And if we don't give them that, they're like that saltwater fish that's out of the water. But I want to
And
say thank you so much, Dr. Duncan. I appreciate you so very much.
thank you. And I would just add to that, if we don't give it to them, then we're partially to blame.
We are not
And
partially to blame. We are totally to
we
blame.
are totally to blame. And so that's why I appreciate this invitation every
Yes.
single time.
Yes.
Every single time.
That's right.
Well, I'll go next. And Ernestine, thank you for coming on and spending the time. This is a real important subject. And actually, we could talk about this because it spins off into the expansion of the Second Amendment rights. That, America, there's a segment of America that just wants everybody to have a gun, to include 6-year-olds now.
Now.
Mhm.
So, but that's another discussion that we need to have, and America needs to have,
Yes.
and across this country, because tens of thousands of people are being killed every
That's
year.
right. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
We always say we're always going to be out there, and we're talking about gun violence. There's a march every week,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and it makes no difference. Really doesn't in the greater scheme of things.
And Colonel, and it's important too that add, if you have a gun in your home, you have children in your home, at least teach them gun safety.
Yes.
Talk to them about it. Don't just have it there. Talk to them about safety.
Yeah.
James, I'm sorry.
Cut those violent video games off
Yes, get rid of
at a
them.
young age. Wait, like Dr. Duncan says, wait till their minds develop when they're
Exactly.
27 or 30 years old,
They can understand.
and then let them watch the games. But
Uh-huh.
thanks again. But Portsmouth Coffee Talk is here for our voice.
For our community.
In our future.
We got to get Dr. Duncan her cup since she's a co-host. She's got to have her coffee talk cup here, James.
For tonight, I'll just hold my water. Okay.
Okay. Thank you so very much, Dr.
Thank
Duncan.
you.
We appreciate
Thank
you so very much.
My
And
pleasure.
thanks to each of you on Facebook Live. Thank you, Antoinette Chapman, and all the Chapmans, a whole lot of Chapmans online today. We got the whole family out here today. Colonel, your whole crew is out here. That's called family. They were talking about family, Dr.
That's
Duncan.
right.
They were talking about
That's
family
it.
earlier, and now we got Antoinette, we got Thomas, we got some more. We got a whole lot of Chapmans out here. So
Okay.
thank you, Chapmans,
Good.
for coming on and joining us on tonight. And thanks to each of the others who came on to share and to hear about this issue dealing with children and gun violence. And James later on will have it on our YouTube, Coffee Talks YouTube page. We need you all to go and subscribe to our page, please. And you can watch all of the videos that we have had for the past 2 years, you know. And why don't we maybe put a challenge out there, James, to get them, if you can tell us what your favorite video, go to YouTube and then tell us what your favorite video was. What was the favorite show? We need to think about that, okay?
We'll figure out something to give you.
So we can get some, so we can get some subscriptions going here, okay?
Okay.
But thank
And,
you, Dr. Duncan. And thank you, James and Colonel. I love you guys.
Program note, this Monday, of course, is Martin Luther King Day, and we will be doing the show. Well, we'll be recording live of the Church and Community in Action program that they have every year during this time. It's going to be at Edmond Center, am I correct?
Edmond Center.
But if you're going to be there, I guess, I don't know if there's any tickets still left or what the situation is there, but if you can't make it, we're going to be there live, filming the program. And one of the honorees is one of our favorites here, Dr. Knight.
Dr. Joe Knight.
You have to say it a few
Yeah.
times because he has a few of those PhDs, but and some other people will be recognized there. I'll put it on Facebook later, but
Yeah.
join us
John
live.
Scott, Massey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you can't make it to the program, join us. It
Yeah.
starts at 8 o'clock and Boston Coffee Talk will be live there.
Great.
Thank you all.
Great solution to be there.
Mhm.
Thank you
Okay.
to each of you.
Take care, everybody.
Okay. Good evening.
Bye-bye.